Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of A Shameless Period. Oh, wait. Yeah. Yay. Okay, so today what I have in store for anybody who's watching this is something a lot more practical. Episode 1 and 2, we went into the real basics of it, how things start off and what is what is a period, and then the next one was, I actually forgot what the next one was. But anyway, moving on to moving on to episode 3 of Shameless Period. So today what we're going to do is we're going to explore period management, and this is part 1. So the reason I made it part 1 and part 2 is there's a lot of stuff around period management, and there's a lot of things that get included, um, which means that apart from period products, it's hygiene, food intake, and pain management. So it's quite a vast area, and I think it's also quite important to understand uh, things from, like, various perspectives, which is probably what I've been saying from the beginning of starting this page. So yeah, so we're gonna explore what pads, tampons, and menstrual cups are, because these three are currently the most widely used products for period management. So most women use, I think, about, uh, it was said that about 73% of women use pads, and about probably 66% use tampons. But menstrual cups are of a product that's really gaining a lot of popularity. So we're going to go a little deeper into, what these products do for us and how we use them. So I actually am going to do a demonstration. Hopefully that goes well. Yeah, just so that you can gain a better understanding of, what exactly is happening, uh, what exactly is happening in terms within the toilet cubicle, and how these things work, and yeah, and just seeing how they impact us, how you could help out. I'm also going to be showing you, what are because each of these products come in a range of varieties, right, based on the kind of flow a person has, whether it's a heavy flow, whether it's a light flow, what are the preferences of the person, because preference plays a big role in it, because it's also um very determined by the relationship you share with your body, and that is really crucial here. And it's going to, if you actually notice, a lot of what we do, it actually reflects on the kind of relationship we have with our bodies, and also how maybe changing the relationship with our body could also change the choice of product that we might use, and how it influences us, how it influences the environment. Really like to dive into the social impacts of each of these things, how it impacts different people from different parts of society, and because there's like a real massive crux of an issue there. And for those shopping, I'm going to show you how to shop better when you're looking for period products for somebody else, which it could be a friend of yours, it could be a girlfriend, wife, daughter, uh, mother, so it's just to understand so that you're more empowered to help them out in a difficult time. And at the same time, you're not looking at a wall of, pads and tampons, because of the kinds of varieties that are there, and being absolutely dumbfounded because there are so many varieties and so many brands, and the real small bits that actually hold the important information. I'm going to be showing you how to pay attention to those things, and not get too stressed out about how to shop for these things. Yeah. So that is my introduction for today. Um, just gonna, okay, great. Then, so let's just dive in. So I'm gonna be first talking about pads. What are pads, right? So pads are pads are these line. So it's kind of like a really, how would you just it's kind of like the function of it is like a really complex diaper. And I know that saying this is can actually offend a lot of people because diapers are either attributed to babies or the elderly or people who suffer from any kind of incontinence. Incontinence meaning an inability to control your urine function or your bowel movements. So yeah, so but essentially, the principle of a pad, the principle of a sanitary napkin. So pads are more formally called sanitary napkins. So yeah, the principles of these things is that um, it it absorbs. It has certain chemicals in it that absorb smells, and then you also have and it's actually padded with cotton, and mainly compressed cotton. Like you see that the more complex or the more expensive a pad is, you see that there is a more complex compressed cotton alongside chemicals that trap smells. And it's also really built in for comfort, where instead of something that's really bulky, it's really thin and kind of goes along the lining of a panty, right? So I'm gonna just show you what that is like. Oh, to an extent, I was feeling bad that I had, like, I had to probably waste a pad, but then I was just like, for science and for understanding. And in the absence of menstrual blood, and I didn't want to use real water because, to actually see the effects of how these things work. So I'm actually going to like take it out, show it to you guys. And I've got mango juice because I had to get creative and I kind of just rummaged around in my fridge just to what I had in there that could really help bring about better understanding about these things. So, mango juice is going to be our substitute period blood today. Don't like it may affect your perception of things, but it's purely functional. It is for complete educational purposes. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna start with a pad. Okay. So ideally, a pad looks like this. This one is a white one. I've actually got a green one somewhere. I think like a green one would be better. Yeah. So this one, right? You have so it you have a lot of brands, each of them having their own designs. you know I like the colors. It's basically anything that adds a pop of color, makes somehow fools you that things are springy and pleasant. So yeah, so yeah, this is what you call an ultra pad. Okay, so they're pretty heavy duty. They're quite absorbent. Therefore, the heavier days, the heavier days of flow. And this pretty much, pretty much a very similar principle. But this is more of a local brand. So this is something you find that the local brands are always a little more basic in their presentation. Yeah. And yeah, but before we dive into that, before we just go a little more in detail into what pads are, how they function, and things like that, a few basics about periods is that actually the kind of blood that a person gives out during menstrual cycles is not that much, but it seems like a lot. That is if everything is quite healthy, and if everything is going quite all right according to an ideal menstrual cycle, then you have something that falls within 25 to 31 days of a menstrual cycle, the entire cycle taking place. And your period would last about 3 to 7 days. And the amount of blood you may be giving out per period, right? During those 3 to 7 days, the content of blood is about 80 mils, right? 80 milliliters. um, and of course, it's not 80 milliliters for everyone, it's up to 80 milliliters for people. And so, up to 80 milliliters means that you're falling within a relatively normal period, right? You're falling within something that is not dangerous for your body, something that does not need to give rise to concern. Okay. And the 80 mils is the blood content, but it's also mixed in with the tissue, with the vaginal fluid, with um yeah, and with a lot of water. And if you actually see, just recapping the content of the blood, the contents of this blood, menstrual blood, so what actually happens here is that the menstrual blood is of very vehicular purposes, right? It's not because you got hurt that you're bleeding. So the blood that is being emitted at this point of time from the body, it is something that is it's something as like a lubricant, right? It keeps the entire system lubricated so that it allows for a flow of the tissue, which is the shedded uterine wall, right? That's the kind of tissue, which is what you see is the lumpy matter that is mixed in with the blood that comes out during the menstrual cycle that takes place during the menstrual period from three to for those 3 to 7 days, right? And yeah, so in that content, so you see the blood content actually does not have a clotting agent, it does not have the thrombin, right, which helps the blood clot and become harder, and to make sure that it stops the bleeding. So that we don't have within this kind of blood. And then another few special things about this blood is that it actually does not have the highest iron content, the RBCs, or it doesn't have the highest content of hemoglobin, which is the oxygenated blood. So as you can see that the kind of concentration of the blood is not the essential kind of blood that is circulating through to in the rest of our body, but it is the blood that is purely more on the liquid. The liquid side of the blood is holds more of a purpose here. It helps to clean out the uterus, and it helps to clean out all the remnant tissue, and then afterwards, as from the uterus you have all the uterine walls. Okay, let me go into that thing again. It's always easier. Yeah. So from the uterus, right? From the uterus you have yeah. So from the uterus you have the uterine wall over here. So what happens is the blood is completely vehicular. So the blood is only to lubricate, make sure it loosens up everything. It makes sure that nothing more is sticking to the wall. The endometrium layer is getting shed, right? And then as you see, so you have the blood coming down, mixing up with everything, and when it's a liquid, it obviously is going to flow out a lot easier. Then you have it mixed with the vaginal discharge, right? So that gets mixed in as it's coming out through the vagina. And apart from this, it's not just the blood, so everything that just doesn't like flow out. You do have the muscles. You have the muscles that are working here, they're contracting and relaxing and helping for movement to take place. And then again, you have even the vaginal walls also, which is very muscular in nature, contracting and relaxing to make sure that you're you're letting out all those emissions that need to come out of your system at that point of time. And it's kind of like an anti-infection system, so you keep letting it come out, then it's going to do its job, and it's most likely not going to allow for infection to take place. Yeah, so that's kind of like a little bit of a recap. So yeah, getting back to pads. Yeah, so getting back to pads, uh this is something that is a more heavy duty kind of pad, right? It is a pad that I would wear typically on a very heavy day, which for me particularly is the second day. The second and the third day is probably the the most intense time for me during my period. Which brings me to one of the questions that somebody asked me. It was actually one of my cousins who actually asked me this question for the session. Is that for the 3 to 7 days, do women have a consistent kind of flow? Is it as intense for those 3 to 7 days, or is there a range? So that again differs from woman to woman, right? I feel that when you are stepping into your menstrual cycle, so this is during, oh yes, episode 2 we did teenage, right? We did puberty. So yeah, so during that time, what happens is that in Tanner 4 and Tanner 5, which is probably about 1 to 2 years from the time you get your first period. So that time is quite a regulatory period for the body to get used to the release of the egg and the traveling of the egg and then the letting out of the egg. And that's when you see the period. You're experiencing your period month to month. But it is also quite common to see at this point of time that there are a lot of irregularities, right? Initially, mine first started as just spotting. And what is spotting? Spotting at the end of the day is it could either just be like drops of blood and not a very heavy flow. It can leave you quite confused, like, do I have it, do I not have it? What is that kind of? So it's kind of a very in between starting up of the engine but sputtering, sort of like that. And you have that kind of spotting initially for some people, or some people it just starts off with a bang. So yeah, for me, for a couple of months, I did not have cramping. I did not have a heavy flow. I didn't have anything like that. So I actually thought, oh, I have it a little bit easy. But no, the third month kind of was a horrible reality check for me. And so for that, for so you have spotting, and then it generally also starts like that, and then or sometimes you just suddenly see a blob of blood in your panties, right? And till today, when I see that, it's still like I get a shock, and I was like, oh no, I'm getting my period. So yeah, so it's something that I don't think I get over quite quickly. Yeah, it's one of the thrilling moments of my life. So yeah, um, so those 2 years are quite a regulatory period, and how it was quite an intense period for me, because even now I have very intense periods, and I'm on medication for the same. So the intensity of those periods was such that mine went a lot longer than 3 to 7 days. I had 3 to 7 days of heavy period. No, I had about 5 to 7 days of a very heavy period, 3 days of like quite extreme cramping, and then but my entire thing from the start date to the last date of when I would use pads would be around 10 days. Okay, so 10 to 11 days was quite a normal thing for me for probably the first 2 years. And then again, my system started changing, right? So if you see, there will be changes in pattern. Even if you're having a normal period, that is without endometriosis, without PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or any of the other things that kind of really have quite a loud impact on the kind of period that you have. So even when it was a normal period for me, it was really intense. And of course, by then I got diagnosed with dysmenorrhea. But apart from that, there was nothing else that really stood out from. But it was quite normal for me to have a 10-day period, you know. So 3 to 7 is not a strict, 3 to 7 is an average. And the kind of bleeding that you have, if it's within 80 mils, it's it's okay. But if it goes beyond 80 mils, then you might want to, go and see a doctor. And also another thing that happens is, so how would you know that it's beyond these 80 mils? Because you can't keep carrying a measuring cup around. Is that ideally you would be changing your pad like every hour, or not even every hour. You're probably changing several pads every hour, or several tampons every hour, and you're constantly visiting the bathroom. And sometimes um, it may actually be fresh blood that's leaving your body, and not just the vehicular blood. And so all of those things impact your body. It impacts your health, overall. And yeah, so that's what it is. So I'm just going to open this app like a little prezi. Yeah. So you have this happening. So the way I open it is, it's like it's sealed. So, you know, so, and you can hear this through the toilet stall. So people who feel really conscious about this in a woman's toilet, I think, like, just understand that other women also go through it, and they'll just be like, oh, the poor thing's on her period. I don't think anybody's thinking really bad of you as such. So yeah, so you're opening it out. So this is how it is. Can you see it? Yeah, this is how it is. So this is a pad, right? And now over here at the back, you find that, so it's like a peel off, right? It's a peel off where you're doing this thing, uh, and you have these two rows of glue here. So it's kind of a glue that helps it stick on. It's an adhesive that helps it stick on to the panty, right? So I've taken that off, and now we're gonna put it on a panty, right? So it's easier when you're in the loo because you got your legs holding up the panty. So yeah, so this is how it is. And when you're putting it in, this mid portion of it between the two folds, okay, that comes in the crotch line of the panty, right? So the crotch line of the panty here. Sorry, I'm not going to use a new panty. You should know what a panty looks like. And if it's a used one, it's going to have marks, right? And so I've stuck the middle portion here, and this smaller front portion goes over here, right, in front, and it covers the mons pubis, the pubic bone bit. And then you have this running all the way at the back, which should ideally kind of start lining a little bit on your butt crack, right? So what this does is, so actually this is something I use for the second and the third day, and mostly for the nights. Because what happens is, when in the night, you don't have any kind of control over the flow, and because of this, because it's got like a longer rump over here, like it just expands out. So if there's a heavy flow, the heavy flow will fall here. Okay, so now I'll just explain that bit. But here right now we have the wings. Can you see the wings? Yeah. So this portion again is another adhesive portion of it. So I'm going to be ripping that off. Okay. So the wings, and this one, so that's a wing, and it comes under the crotch portion of the panty. and the same with the other side, right? So it comes like that. So it should look like this. So now if you're wearing the panty, it should look like, yeah. So it should look like this, right? So it's kind of like, so you have the wings here, and if you look inside, you have the pad lining it there, right? And now why the wings? The wings are really important because in case there's like really heavy flow coming out of your vagina at that point of time, and it's a really big kind of lump of blood that comes, right, with the tissue. So you have the maximum blue portion. Can you see the blue portions on the pad? So those blue portions actually they turn the blood. So one function of them is they turn the blood from like flowy, jellyish kind of liquidy blood into proper gel, right? And what that does is it traps it underneath that layer, which allows the top layer, which is actually a thin net layer, to remain dry, so it's not comfortable and it's not icky. So it's quite comfortable that way. And the bluish bits also, what they actually have, so there's a lot of chlorine in this, okay? So that's one of the main things that gives it its white appearance. It's chlorinated cotton and it's compressed cotton, right? So all of those things, they trap the blood. And then you also have the chemicals to trap odor, okay? And this has implications health wise for us, which I will cover a little later in this session. So yeah, so now you have that. So we're going to do the mango juice, right? Hopefully you can see it. I'm going to try and bring this down so that, okay. And yeah, okay, so I'm gonna pour a, so you have, yeah, so you have the mango juice sitting there and kind of just absorbing it, very similar to a diaper, right? Except that the mango juice is really like, or like, let's call it fake blood. The fake blood's kind of, it's a little thicker than water, but it's not as thick as the menstrual thing. So as you can see, it has absorbed it, right? And now if I touch this, it's dry. Yeah. So I feel like one of those ads, you know. But yeah, that's how it works. And then see, it's trapped quite quickly. It's trapped the liquid, and it's left a really dry surface. So what it's doing right now is turning it into gels. Yeah. Let me just check. Questions? Any questions? No. So yeah, so that is how a pad functions. And then when you're removing it, so this will be quite discreet, right? And then when you're removing it, you take it off, you peel it off, and then you wrap it up in this and put it in the bin, right? So that's how pads work. That's how sanitary napkins work for all of us, right? So the next thing I'm going to show you um, is actually a menstrual cup, right? The menstrual cup is something that's really gaining in popularity. Okay, it is. So this is my menstrual cup. Um, I haven't actually got down to using it too often because um, my comfort preference is a pad. So it is not as, I find like things that are relatively intrusive quite difficult to handle. So yeah, but anyway, hopefully I get down to using the cup. But anyway, so this is what you call a menstrual cup, right? So a menstrual cup is made from medical grade silicone, right? And you can see that it's flexible, right? And it's very bendy, right? And so how we use this is that it gets folded. It gets folded. So you have like a bunch of folds that you do. So this is what you call the punch down fold, right? I'm gonna try. Yeah, the punch. Yeah, here you go. This is the punch down fold, and so this would be basically somebody who's using this would put this up their vagina, right? And it goes and sits at the base of the cervix. So when it goes and sits at the base of the cervix, this will open out and it'll create like a suction. So it'll just stay. It'll just stay and it'll collect the blood, like, let's say, and it'll look something like that. So it'll collect the blood and it'll just hold everything, the blood like that. And so there are a lot of perks to this, because one thing is it's still inside your system. So because it hasn't touched air, your bacterial growth is very less because it's still within the body. Then the other thing that's really great about this um is that it it keeps the system lubricated, and the it doesn't rob the vagina of any hydration. So it's actually, it keeps quite a healthy ecosystem maintained for your uh, for your insides, for basically your vagina and the blood that's coming out of the vagina. And from what I've heard, a lot of my friends who've used this, they've said that, okay, it's like probably slightly messy because, like, when you extract it, you have to, like, put your fingers back in there and kind of press this in, break the vacuum, and pull it out. So it's quite an intrusive process. Yeah. It's quite intrusive in the way it works. But at the same time, there's so many perks to this. And I think it's also about figuring out your comfort levels with this. It's figuring out how comfortable you are with your body, how comfortable you are with the insides of your body. And, because it really requires you to be very relaxed, and it requires you to be quite comfortable with your own fingers kind of exploring the insides of your vagina. And I know that becomes really difficult if we already hold shame towards our body, if we are not really spoken to about masturbation, being allowed to masturbate, being allowed to explore in there. um, all of these things really impact us, even if we cognitively try to bring ourselves out of it. At the time when these messages are coming to us, it becomes really challenging, because at that point of time, that was when it's the first time we're learning something. Our brains have the maximum capacity of sponging the first kind of instruction that comes. So, sorry, sorry about that. Um, so yeah, that is so that's about this. So that's about the menstrual cup. The other perks about the menstrual cup is it's quite sustainable. Getting one, you need just one cup to last you 10 years. And the only kind of cleanliness that, like, the kind of hygiene aspect of it, is that you boil this for about 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning of your period before you start using it. And once you're done with your period, to sterilize it again, you boil it again for another 3 to 5 minutes. Otherwise, for a day-to-day use, you just use and warm water and a good soap, a good soap to just clean it, like, basically. And it stays in your system for about 12 hours. So you can comfortably have this in your system for 12 hours, go about your day, and you don't get affected by it. So even if you're sleeping in the night, it still holds everything. If you're going out in the night, if you're swimming, all of these things, your menstrual cup comes really in handy at that point of time. And yeah, just make sure you're washing your hands when you're using the menstrual cup. But I would say try and give your menstrual cup a go. It is easier for people who are more sexually active because you don't have the hymen, kind of providing that kind of extra obstruction, as well as your vaginal muscles are a lot less tensed and a lot less tight than a person who's never indulged in sex before, right? So, all of these things, but at the same time, a person who is a virgin can still wear this. It's a matter of getting used to it. And it's a matter of, finding the right position and finding a knack. It's a technique. So, it's it's quite it's kind of a lot of exploration and a lot of positions, and doing a lot of circus acts in the bathroom, squatting and one foot up, and yoga and whatnot to get this in. But once you figure it out, and once you figure out something that really works for you, then I think this one becomes a probably right now a lot of people have started switching to this because it's really sustainable, because it doesn't really give out any kind of waste as such, and because it's really economical for us. So yeah, that is something. It gives us a lot of freedom to do a lot more. Um, so that's about the menstrual cup. Yeah. And then finally we have the tampons. Right? So I've got a kind of medium grade tampon. So tampon, this is a tampon without an applicator. You get a tampon with applicators, and they're kind of a little easier to, put it up there. Like put it up in the vagina. So it's a little easier because you're having like the kind of, I'm not sure if it's a lever system, but you're kind of having a system that pushes through. So just to help you understand how tampons function, tampons actually the first time I saw it, it reminded me of it reminded me of a bullet, reminded me of my finger, and also it reminded me of those lasers that we used to have in school, where you could point at the board and absolutely disrupt class for the teacher. So yeah, so this is a tampon. As you can see, it's actually a compressed cotton. So you have like really tightly packed cotton, okay, and then it's kind of got a bullet head so that it helps for it helps for the movement of the tampon up the vagina. And then so once it's completely inside, it sticks to the walls of the vagina, so it relies on the walls of the vagina. And you have tampons in different grades, starting from a light flow to a really heavy flow. So I guess based on that, you'll have to figure out you know which one you'd prefer, and also how much your vagina can accommodate, because the heavier the flow, the thicker the tampon. Yeah. So, and then it has a string like this, so that it helps you in pulling it out once the tampon's up to capacity. So yeah, so that's a tampon for you. But this again is a chlorinated cotton. Like there's chlorine there to give it that white kind of medical grade look, right? So that endangers you in a way, just like how the pads endanger you in a way, is that you can have this in your system. You can have this in your system for probably a max of 6 hours safely. If it goes beyond 6 hours, you are at the risk of getting toxic shock syndrome. So for the men, there's there is a chance of women getting toxic shock syndrome if they use any of these products. So that's kind of like an added risk to it. So, but anyway, like these tampons again help you in swimming. They help you in. A lot of people find tampons really convenient, but medical professionals who handle toxic shock syndrome, they suggest that you alternate with a pad or a panty liner whichever works for you, to make sure that you don't always have something up the vagina that has these chemicals, and that's kind of creating an atmosphere for bacteria to release toxins, because that's basically what toxic shock syndrome is your reaction to the poison that of the toxins released by the bacteria, that is created due to this foreign item absorbing the blood in your system. So yeah, so now I'm going to show you how these work. So this is your period blood for today, and then we're gonna so it just so once you put it in, it just absorbs. It'll absorb the blood up to point, and it'll keep expanding. So even if people think that it's going to get stuck in there, it doesn't really, because what happens is once it starts expanding, then it uh, it starts pushing itself out, because it becomes pretty big for the vaginal walls, right? So see, you already see how much. Yeah, so that's so it immediately soaks it in, and that's how big it gets. So because it becomes that big from that really compressed cotton, it starts moving itself out. Yeah, and I'm not going to be drinking that mango juice after that. So yeah, so that is the demo for the pads, the tampons, and the menstrual cups, right? And I hope you gained a better understanding of how these things work. Now, some other alternatives that are there for some other alternatives that are there for periods is some really interesting stuff. I actually enjoyed looking that up, because there was some stuff there was at least one thing that I hadn't heard of in a law at all. And I'm generally really up to date with my research about these things. So it was really interesting, and the most interesting alternative that I came across were sea sponges. So sea sponges are actually used as a sustainable way to as a sustainable biodegradable way to handle a period. But if you get a true sea sponge, so there are two. There's like the synthetic sea sponge, as well as no, a synthetic sponge as well as a sea sponge. And what you have to do, it's a little bit messy, where you'll have to insert it in your vagina, and then it absorbs all the blood, and then you wash it. You kind of squeeze the blood out, wash it under the sink, and reinsert it, and that's the most synthetic one. Whereas the sea sponge, that you'll have to cut it, and apparently you have to cut it and shape it towards shape it to your kind of structure of your vagina. So, interestingly, it made me think that, okay, that's actually going to give me a lot of understanding towards my vagina, because I would have to understand the design of it and how it fits and stuff like that, and make trimmings and cuttings and make sure it fits. But that's like a really abstract, lesser known alternative. The most commonly known alternatives are you have something called menstrual discs. They are kind of like cups. They're kind of cups made of silicone. So these you fold them and insert it into your vagina. And an interesting point about this is it allows you to have sex during your period, and it's not as messy, but I think once you have to tug it out, that's the part that gets it messy. I don't have a menstrual disc with me, because I didn't see myself really using it, so I didn't invest in it. But yeah, you can look it up. Menstrual discs are something that actually allow you to have sex on your period. And to somebody who had asked me, again, my cousin, I think, who asked me about, can you have sex on your period? Yes, you can. If a person is comfortable enough to have comfortable enough and is able to have sex at that time and the level of discomfort is not as much, you can definitely have sex on your period. Another thing to know about your sex on your period, uh, you're probably not in too much danger of, you know, having getting pregnant during like period sex. But yeah, like I think if you're okay with it, and there's an understanding that you and your partner understand what it is about that if you can, if somebody's uncomfortable with it, because some people can be uncomfortable with the sight of blood, and you know so it can be quite something that you probably have to get used to. Some people may be really closed off to it. Some people may be open enough to consider and grow on the idea of period sex. So there's a lot of there, but at the end of the day, it is the communication between you guys who wants to try it out, whether you're comfortable enough, and really just not looking at the gender of the person, but looking at the comfort and looking at the openness of communication, and making sure that you educate yourself as to what can happen during period sex. And because sometimes what can happen is, for the woman who's undergoing any kind of menstrual cramps and things like that, the body is already in quite a bit of uh, it there are muscles that are pulled, and it's a probably a defense reaction that they may actually find it more painful during period sex. But at the same time, pe- period sex can actually also help relax the body. So again, it's really person to person, you know um and yeah, so if that's something that you want to consider with your partner, then please go ahead and talk about it, educate yourself about it, and you'll really, you never know, if you're going to be stepping into something new, you might actually find something that you like, and something to explore, and something quite interesting. So, yeah, and again, that boils down to the relationship you have with your body. And if the person who has the periods is comfortable enough with it, is able to sit with that idea, okay, of, the blood involved in the period, and the kind of role the blood plays during sex, and if they're comfortable with that, and if the person you're having sex with is comfortable with that, then I don't think anything should stop you. Yeah, that is that brings me to the end of that segment. And then, yes, the alternatives, coming back to the alternatives. um, the alternatives are, you do have something again that's gaining popularity, that probably how period management started, is cloth pads, right? Reusable cloth pads. And you have now reusable pads made from bamboo, a bamboo fabric, and activated carbon to trap the smells. And those have a life of around 5 years again, which seems to be more of a financial component, financial investment. It produces less waste, if you're and then its maintenance is now a lot easier. Earlier, women had to roll up fabric, make sure they layer their panties, but this one's actually got quite a really nice um, absorbent cushioned fabric. And yeah, and it's got wings and everything to clip onto your panties, so it's really great. And you get a set of six most of the time with a bag. So once you get, so you just carry a couple with you, and then you come back and just throw the used pads into washing. And yeah, you can actually do it with your laundry, your normal laundry. You can put it into the washing machine. So it's actually taken out the gross factor by quite a bit. That's if you have that feeling that it is gross. Or a lot of people who do not have like a daily laundry cycle, what they do is they just keep it under the shower. So as they're having a shower, they just leave the pad, let it rinse and soak in the hot water for some time, and then go to the sink and like clean it up. So that's one. That's also a really good way. That's kind of picking up, and it's also really economical for women, because the economical implications of period management is quite a bit when you think about it. And it actually stops a lot of women from going to school, girls from going to school, women to going for work. It actually, at one point of time, it was a major source of stress for me that I wouldn't be able to leave my house, I wouldn't be able to leave the country and live on my own because I have really heavy periods. Because so that is the kind of I have a heavy and a painful period. So that's the kind of thing impact that it can have on your mental health and your confidence and things like that. Um, yeah, and so you have menstrual discs, you have reusable pads, you have sponges, and let me just check again. You have sponges, and you have organic tampons with reusable applicators. So organic tampons are tampons with non-chlorinated cotton, so they actually have a higher chance of decomposing a lot, and is that the word? Yeah, I think that's the word. But yeah, so it's biodegradable. It's more biodegradable than the latter. And also it reduces your chances of getting TSS, which is toxic shock syndrome. And toxic shock syndrome can affect anyone, but this is one of the scenarios that increases a woman's chance of being susceptible to toxic shock syndrome. And toxic shock syndrome has got some really some very scary implications in terms of course, you have a fever, because it's a sign of an infection and things like that. But in really severe cases, it can lead to dehydration of your system, organ damage. You may need dialysis for your kidneys, and in some really extreme cases, it can prove to be fatal due to sepsis, right? So I don't mean to scare you, but it is definitely one of the scarier implications of something that we have to put into our bodies every month. And please change your pads every 6 hours. I understand sometimes, like, you're going to think, oh, okay, I haven't really used it that much. It's not got too much of blood. I can actually pull it through like for a full day, not at the risk of your health. I really don't think that's worth it. Yeah. And then finally, the final part of it is what to look for when you're shopping, right? When you're shopping and you're looking for pads. So you have different grades of pads which indicate the flow, right? So you have to, if you're going to shop for somebody in a pharmacy, or you're going to the store, you generally are faced with this huge wall of pads and all these different colors, and it's really overwhelming, and the amount of stimulus that you get is really disorienting, especially if you're not familiar with it. You don't know what to look for. And I've seen this. It's really and it's unfair for us to judge people who are unfamiliar with the system of selecting things, because just from the kind of variation and the range of products that we now find in stores when it comes to menstrual cups, when it comes to tampons, and when it comes to pads. So just a few things to look for. So number one, look for the colors, right? Your colors indicate give you kind of a good idea of what you're looking out for. If you're looking out for a heavy range, and you're looking at, so you'll have like the dark blues, or you'll have the blacks to indicate it's nightwear. So you have the really long pads with the heavy duty ones. So that is one. Then two is, look for the kind of pad that's on the packing. Okay, so if you actually see, this one shows that it has wings. It does have wings and it's quite long. Okay, and then if you look here, you'll have this, right? And it's an indicator. The kind of drops are an indicator that it is really heavy duty. It is for very, very, very heavy flow. And the size, and you'll see a size gradient. The one that is highlighted in white is the size of the pad that is inside. Okay, so these would be the really important things to first look for. Look for the image of the pad on the cover. Okay, then look for this this thing that shows you what kind of pad it is. Okay, if it's a long pad, if it's a medium pad, or if it's a short pad. If it's a short pad, it will be for light flow. If it's for medium pad, it will be like a moderate to a heavy flow. And then if it's a really long one, then you know it's meant for like real heavy duty stuff. Then then you'll have something like night, and you'll have a crescent moon on it or something like that. So look out for those things if you're looking for nightwear, if the person you're shopping for wants heavy duty. And then the most important would be to see this. If all of them are highlighted in white, it means it's a really heavy flow, right? And look for wings. Okay, wings is almost always most preferable because it protects the leakage system and it protects the panty from getting stained with blood, right? So it kind of, it allows for that overflow and then traps that overflow, traps the overflow on the wings and prevents the leakage of the blood as much as possible on your clothes or on your underwear. Yeah, so this is something that is more for heavy flow. There'll be something, this pad will probably come in the medium section, yeah, of the size of it. And then you'll have like the lovely lighter colors, the pinks and stuff for the light flow. You'll generally have the pinks for the light flow, and if it's a light pink, if it's a darker pink, then you know it's a little bit more heavy duty. So these are kind of just small little signals to kind of direct you into which way to go. And if you actually see, so in this one, again, this one you see has pads. Okay, this one you see as pads, but if you see, it says normal, so that means normal flow, and it means a single, so it's the smallest pad, so that means it's for a relatively lighter flow. It could probably be applicable for the first day or the fourth or the fifth day based on the person's cycle, so ask them. And then you have, yeah, it's normal with wings. I'm just gonna look for the, yeah, and then you have the key at the back here. So you have the key to show what is the intensity with which this pad can take on the thing. So if it's a small pad, so they've even given the grade of the panty and what function it is, right? If it's a small pad, then it's a single drop, that means like the lightest flow. Then again, small pad, double, that means for like slightly heavier than a light flow, and so on and so forth, right? So you have all of that. When it comes to tampons, this is an ideal tampon box, okay? And but this is with a this is the non-applicator, where you just use your finger, or if you have a reusable applicator. So that's another option that you have if you have just a reusable applicator. So this is your normal tampon box. And if you can see again, so you'll find these things as quite standard. So even over here, it indicates the intensity of the period at which it takes, the flow, right? So it says this is a regular. So that means if you have a relatively light period or kind of heading to a more moderate flow, then this would be something. So the highlighted ones show that it's a regular flow. Then you generally also have the key like this somewhere on the box, okay? And as you can see, it says light on the top. So you have again the color code of it's light, so it's only a single drop that's highlighted. Regular is a double drop highlighted. And it even tells you what kind of flow it's looking at, how much of blood it will hold. The first one holds 6 grams, the second one holds 6 to 9 grams, which is a relatively light to moderate flow. And if you see, like, so these are your clues, these are your hints. So just look out for these things, or, point out to something. If it's a light, generally the lighter colors will be for lighter flow, darker colors will be for heavier flow. And the black is generally almost always nighttime ultra pads. Okay. I would suggest generally get them with wings, But if there is a comfort level that the person you are buying it for has already spoken to you about, then just stick to it. Yeah. And yes, and even when it comes to the diva cups, so the menstrual cups are all, they are this would ideally in America be called the diva cup, and then you have the Lena cup, right? The Lena cup is for younger people. It's designed for a smaller vagina and a tighter vagina. This one is actually designed for a person who is sexually active, more or less, but hasn't had children. And then you have a slightly bigger cup size for people who have had children. So there are very small variations of how these things work. Ideally choose something that is made from medical grade silicone, because it will be the safest, and it will be the safest for use. And you know there is something called TPE or rubber. It can be made of TPE or rubber, which is a kind of plastic, and then of course you have rubber. And although they be more flexible, their safety versions, it would probably be seen as more of a foreign object, more susceptible to infection in your system. So that is something to please keep in mind. And if you're a dad, so you now know the how to put on a pad, how to put on a pad. And if you're a dad who has an adolescent girl, and there is no uh, female figure to explain to her, please don't be ashamed to understand how this works. Do a little more research. There's going to be like so much more. There's so many videos to show how it's done. And the thing is, if you're a person who does not show any shame, even if that person, even if the teenager is embarrassed, even if the teenager is embarrassed, they will see the best thing that they can see, and you can model to them is that you're not embarrassed to talk about it. So that will immediately signal to them that it's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to be ashamed of. And it's just something the body does. And this is just some of the things that we have to do in order to get on with our lives, and, to take care of things and manage our periods, and, you know, just live basically. So it's a really great time to model to anybody younger to you, to anybody to you at all, whether it is like starting with a conversation, asking people, okay, what do you want me to get from the store, and literally telling them, listen, this is just something you need. You can talk to me about this, you know, and leave the door open, because it's something that an individual who has faced a lot of shame, probably from somebody, whether it's observed, whether somebody's pointed it out to them, and things like that, if they know that you have an offering for an open conversation about this, that you have some information that's going to help them live a better life, then they may come to a point where they come to you to have this conversation. But the way you can probably help out, whether it's anybody at all, is that tell them that you're not ashamed to talk about it, and that this is just something that happens and there is no shame here, and that they don't need to have any shame, and that you've read about all of this, other women who go through this, and you have conversations about it, and nobody has died from these conversations. In fact, it's brought you closer, and it's a great opportunity to bring in a lot of closeness, especially between father daughter, and and to have that open dialogue, to know that there's nothing shameful about them, and that you are not ashamed to have this conversation with them. And trust me, there will be a lot of great things that will come. It will actually create a grounds for closer relationships, which is really great, and healthier relationships. And it's also for that person's health. It enhances communication, and it really stops the stigma. And once they're able to see themselves as not ashamed, they'll be able to help somebody else not see themselves as shameful. So I think it's really great. This is all an opportunity. It's all opportunities in my eyes to, better a relationship, open up a dialogue, talk about something difficult, and get over it, you know? And yeah, so that brings us to the end of today's session. And so we covered what pads, tampons, and menstrual cups were. We covered alternative uh, period period management products, and yeah, and then how you can go and shop and what to look out for. If you have had some kind of question specifically based on your experience or in regards to any of the material I have just put out, please come back to me. Please message me. Um, and, and I will do my best to answer it and do my own research if I don't know the answers. And yeah, so that brings us to the end of today's session. Join me in my next session, which is on the 12th of September for part two of period management. I will be talking about diet, hygiene, lifestyle, and pain management. So, quite a lot of these things have, a social impact on us, and also hopefully, um, will just help you understand what we go through, and maybe I'll be able to give some new information to somebody who needs better pain management, period management, and based on what I do and what I've had others do and what helps everyone. So yeah, so thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you. I will see you next week. Bye bye. Thanks, Chitsaja. I love your support.